Welcome back to The Long Way Home. I'm your host, Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we are talking about love and relationships. It's been one that's been on my list of topics for a long time. It's something that I wanted to talk about because I feel like relationships in general they can be tricky for a lot of people. So I'm coming at this from a perspective of I've been with my wife for 20 years, going on 20 years in October, September, October, something like that. We've been married for 16. So we've been together for a little while. And we've been through ups and downs. We've had all sorts of problems. If you listen to the regular normal wedding vows, that to having a hold in sickness and health, rich or poor, till death do us part, we've lived those basically. And we've grown along the way. We've both changed a lot in the last 20 years for the better in a lot of ways. We've become set in our ways in some things, but we've also changed a lot. We've opened up, and so I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned along the way. Maybe you are maybe you're younger, you're in a fresh relationship, and you're having some struggles. You're trying to figure out, can I make this work? Is it even worth making it work? Hopefully I can answer some of those questions through this podcast. So to start off, the number one issue in relationships a lot of the times is reported as as money, but it's really communication. Communication is the biggest issue that people run into as a problem when they are in a relationship. It is either they didn't tell me this, they lied to me, even with money, it's that you didn't communicate about your priorities with the money. You didn't work together. And communication isn't just being able to get your message across. Communication is listening, really listening, actively listening to what the other person is telling you, understanding what they're saying, and being willing to admit when you're wrong about things. For a lot of people, I think when you get into a relationship, you don't want to, if you admit that you're wrong, it's somehow a bad thing. And so you'll get into an argument with your significant other, and you'll start really digging in, and you'll start to really think about, you're right, they have to be wrong. And even if you realize in the middle of the argument that you're wrong, you just double down and you don't understand why. And a lot of that self-awareness and that's emotional intelligence and understanding your own quirks and your own problems and being willing to work on those things. And so if you can get past that point, one of the biggest problems my wife and I had when we were younger was I am still, but even then I was very straightforward. I would just tell things very bluntly and just say what I was thinking, and I didn't really use a filter. And she is not she doesn't like confrontation. She is not wanting to have arguments. So I would say something I was upset about or frustrated with, and she would shut down. And it would become impossible to talk because I'm sitting there trying to talk nonstop, and she just doesn't want to have the discussion at all. And normally, if we gave it some time later on, she might send me a text message or she might write something down to tell me how she's feeling. She wasn't very vocal about it. And so that was a very, very hard hurdle for us to overcome. And it caused us a lot of struggle, a lot of strife over the years. And we kind of fell apart for a while. We didn't separate or anything like that, but we didn't fall out of love. I think we hit a time where things were kind of stale and we weren't really as happy as we could have been. And that would be the point that for a lot of people, when they get to that point, that's when divorce happens. And that's when, either somebody cheats on somebody or you feel like you're not in love with the person anymore, so you decide to divorce them and you're going to call it a day, And for us, that was a very real possibility at one point that we could have gotten divorced. But we hit a moment in our relationship. We hit that catalyst moment where it was going to go one way or the other. And we chose to make it better. We chose to improve ourselves, to get better together. And the first part of that was opening up communication. and talking to each other and sharing things that we normally would keep inside and being as open and honest as we possibly could. And that moment was the real opening, and I almost consider it like the real start to our relationship in a lot of ways, because even though we had been together for years prior to that, it was two young people trying to figure things out. I mean, from the time we got together, because we met in 2004, we had our first daughter in 2006, and 2000, we met in high school, graduated in the spring of 2005, summer almost of 2005, but we weren't even together when we graduated because a whole bunch of stuff that maybe I'll get into in a future video or talk about something else. But we had been through. Well, you know what? Actually, let's talk about it. This podcast is about talking about my history, my past. So let's talk about that. So we had met in 2004. My mom was sick, and I was working at Walmart, and things. I wasn't sure what life was going to hold after high school. And I met this girl in the toy section at Walmart. She was working there as well, and I was like, "Oh, she's cute." And I was afraid to talk to her because I wasn't really I could talk to girls, but I wasn't good at expressing when I liked somebody. You know the feeling when you have a crush on someone. You're like, "Ooh, they're cute, and maybe I should talk to them, but I'm too nervous." So while we would like flirt, it wasn't anything serious. But we wound up after probably a month of just kind of flirting and stuff. We decided, let's go on a date. I took her to the Columbus Zoo. Was our first date, and it was mostly because like I wanted to do something fun. It was around Christmas time, and I thought it was romantic. We'll go walk under the lights, and because they put up a big wall lights display every year at the zoo, and there's just Christmas lights everywhere. Get some hot chocolate and walk and have a good time, and so we did, and we had a great night. And that was the night that we actually had our first like real kiss, because she was wearing this. It was blue raspberry or not lip gloss, lip balm. And I was like, "Oh, what's that taste like?" And she's like, "What do you want to find out?" So like that was really cool. And so we had that moment, and from there we were typical teenagers. We wanted to be together all the time. The problem was we were 18, but our parents still wanted us to be like 10. So they wanted typical parents that you have a curfew and you have all this, and I'm going to put restrictions on you for all of this stuff. So our parents were kind of a pain in the ass with that. We wound up one weekend running away. we went to, so I picked her up from work. Her dad was waiting. She was at Walmart. I had gotten fired. And I was picking her up. We decided already we were leaving for the weekend. We didn't want our parents to know. And I saw her dad's truck down the way. He was waiting for her to come out. Well, she came out and got in my car. I was at the opposite door. And we left. And I later found out like he'd gone in and he'd been trying to find out where she was. And that's how he found out that she'd already left. And then our parents went nuts. They started calling us, freaking out. At first, angry. They went through all the stages of grief through the night. And we just ignored the phone call, shut off our phones, and we're like, we're not talking. We're staying the weekend out. I called my mom the next morning to let her know, hey, we're okay. Because she'd left several voicemails just crying, upset. Later and later it got. And so I was like, hey, we're okay. But I'm not telling you where we are. We'll be back in a couple of days. We need some time alone. And so it was a rocky couple of months there with our parents just being, and we decided to move out together. We moved in with her stepbrother and sister-in-law, I guess is what they were. And that lasted for about a month, maybe, where I dropped out of school. I had this idea that I could go in the army, and I was like, I'm gonna get in the army, and we're gonna have all the money we need. And then I found out that I wouldn't get a sign-on bonus till after basic training in AIT, and I was like, well, that's not going to do us any good. We need the money now. So I dropped out of school, which got me out of the delayed entry program and pissed a lot of people off who thought I was just throwing my future away. Well, that month that we were down there, I got a job and wasn't going fast enough, wasn't making enough money to move out and get our own place, and that pissed off the people we were living with. I think the whole thing in general was just to try to break us up, which is why they kind of let it happen. They knew they didn't have a choice, and so they were like, we'll get you guys broken up. And so they caused problems and did and had some issues. And so we wound up breaking up. I came back up, re-enrolled in school, plenty of time to graduate still. I had about 2 months left and was able to graduate. Just barely, squeaked by, but I did graduate. And so her and I were broken up. She moved back home. We didn't really talk. That was over the summer my mom died. So I was going through a whole lot of emotions. And that fall came around and I was like, look, I sent her an email, an archaic way for a more civilized time. But I sent her an email basically saying, look, do you want to go? I think we should still be friends. You want to go see a movie or something? You know, she was planning on going to the movies. And so I was like, let's go see a movie together. And we wound up getting back together. You know, so we were split up for a couple of months. And we wound up getting back together and moving in with each other within like a month or two of that. It was around Christmas 2005 when we got our first apartment, and we weren't ready. We were immature, and we made mistakes. There was nights that we would argue about shit. We would fight. Nothing huge. It was more of like she would shut down, and it frustrated me because I'm like, I just want you to talk, just talk to me, and she wouldn't. She would shut down completely, and our communication was just non-existent. I wasn't listening to her. She wasn't listening to me. But we stuck it out. We persevered. A part of that was because we found out a couple months after moving in together that we were pregnant with our first daughter. And so that was a whirlwind of things. We went through all kinds of financial troubles. We lost the apartment we were in, moved in with my father, who I hadn't spoken to in years that I was now back in touch with. That lasted a couple of months before he was like, hey, so we're moving back to California, so we need you to move out. So it was a crazy time. And our biggest struggles, obviously, we had the financial struggles that I think a lot of young couples go through, but the financial struggles weren't even really the biggest problem. You know, our biggest problem really was our personalities just didn't click. And it was basically the communication thing was a huge issue. And over the years, like I joined the military, and that was probably the thing. Because like I said, I dropped out of the delayed entry program in high school, but I wound up re-signing up and rejoining in 2008, and I think that was kind of the start of making things better down the road. Because I grew up a lot between basic training, AIT, my time in Iraq. Like I grew up in ways and learned to deal with some things because I had a lot of mental health issues. I still deal with mental health issues, but it's in a different way today. Whereas back then it was more about dealing with the grief and the loss of my mom and the guilt of feeling like I could have done something. Like I was dealing with all of that on top of being a new father. I didn't see myself becoming a father ever, let alone when I was 20 years old. So dealing with that and dealing with the communication issues, it's a miracle that we stayed together. You know, a lot of people under the same circumstances would have said, fuck it, I'm done. I'm getting out. And we could have easily done that at any point. And I think the thing that really pushes through is that we're both very hard-headed, very stubborn, and we were unwilling to give up and waver. You know, if it comes down to one thing, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm struggling in my relationship, I don't know what to do. And it takes both people doing this, but you have to be willing to sacrifice and persevere and push through. You have to be willing to say, I'm not perfect, I'm flawed, I want to get better at this. And both of you have to say that. And then you have to start working together. You have to communicate with each other. You have to talk and figure out, okay, what are our big problems, and let's topple these problems one at a time as a team. It's teamwork. I think a lot of people, get together too soon. They get in relationships before they're actually ready to, and then they aren't ready to sacrifice anything to actually make the relationship work. Because while we were too young, really, we were too immature to be in a relationship like that. We wanted to make it work. And it took a lot, and it was a lot of struggle, a lot of heartache. There was sometimes that were harder than others, but we pushed through it and we came out on the other side. All along, you know, she's been, I consider her a friend, but I didn't consider her my best friend until the past few years when we've really come into our own. And I think if your spouse is your best friend, people get all up in arms and all crazy about, oh, I can't marry my friend. No, if your spouse should be your best friend, they should be the confidant, the person you feel comfortable talking about anything with. My wife knows things about me and I know things about her that nobody else knows. It's things that we share together, things that we do together that nobody else knows. And that should be the way it is. You don't have to abandon other friends and family. You can it's fine to have other friends, but your spouse should be your best friend and should be the person that comes first in every scenario. That's if you are going to dedicate yourself to a relationship. Now, if you don't want to be in a relationship and you just want to have somebody to have sex with and somebody that can live with and share the bills, hey, go for it. But be honest about it ahead of time. If you want to be with somebody for the rest of your life, if you do want to commit yourself to somebody like that, first of all, you both have to be willing to do that. You both have to be willing to say, yes, I want this. And then you both have to be willing to sacrifice things and put your relationship and put your significant other first ahead of everything else. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. Most people find it nearly impossible to actually, because they'll say, well, I want to go out drinking with my friends, or I want to, it's not fair that I don't get to do these things that I got to do when I was single. Guess what? You're not single anymore. And as hard as that can be, you have to give up the drinking, you have to give up the partying, you have to give up the single life if you want to be in a relationship. And if you want that relationship to work. And yeah, you can still have the guys' weekends. You can still have the things you do with the guys or the girls or whatever. But that person has to come first. And on that note, with the weekends and stuff like that, one of the other big things that people run into is cheating and infidelity. And that gets into the topic of trust and honesty. And the most important thing, because very rarely, it's not really the act of cheating. It's not really the act of being physical with somebody else that is the real problem in a relationship. The real problem is the breach of trust. Is lying to the person that you are supposedly caring about the most and telling them, for instance, well, I have to work late when you're actually out with somebody else. And the flip side of that is, for some people, they see the trust as the physical side, and oh, I can't believe you would do that. But realistically, you can't look at it that way, because guess what? In a relationship, and you might feel different, but factually it's the same. You don't own the other person's body. You can both decide in a relationship, we're not going to go outside, we're not going to ever be. We're both going to be only with each other for the rest of our lives. And that's okay. And that's where the physical factor comes in, because when somebody cheats and they've said, I'm only going to be with you, but then, oh, well, I wasn't thinking straight. I got too horny. I was thinking, my brain wasn't in the right place. That's a breach of trust. Because that person trusted you. You said you were never going to do this thing, and then you did it. That is the breach of trust. That is where the real problem comes in. And the best way to start with that is understanding that I don't own your body. You are going to do if you start to feel ownership over somebody else, if you start to think that, well, you can only be with me for the rest of, and that person doesn't feel that way, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for problems. That's why it's important to be honest with each other. And even, yes, it can be a deal breaker. If you sit down with somebody and you're truly honest before you get married, and you say, I only want to be with you, I don't want to be with anybody else, I don't want any other physical contact outside of our relationship. And that other person is sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, but I mean, there might be times that I might want to. But then they say, well, okay, I agree. That's, if you're honest, sure, it might end the relationship and you might have to go find somebody else. But if you're not honest, you might wind up ending the relationship 5-10 years down the line when you do something, when you cheat on somebody, when you are with somebody that you're not, that you said that you would never be with. That's why it's important that you're both on the same page. And you both have to wholeheartedly want that. And you both have to understand that, one, don't put yourself in those positions. If you have said to your partner, if you have both agreed, we are not going to sleep with anybody outside of the relationship, be physical with anybody outside the relationship, well, then the first and foremost thing is don't ever put yourself in the situation where that could happen. Don't be alone with somebody that you're attracted to. You have to put these restrictions in place if that's your goal. But again, that goes to your goal as a relationship. And you have to be able to have that discussion and openly communicate with each other. Because if it's not money or communication, it's infidelity. 3 huge things that in relationships. And those are all things that are within the control of the people involved in the relationship, and things that you can have those discussions and be open and honest about. There are some things you cannot control in a relationship. If your spouse or your partner is a controlling, physically abusive, mentally abusive person, you can't fix that. You can't control that. And you need to get out of that relationship as fast as you can. That is the number one thing. You cannot fix other people. That is one of those things that you can't control. But you can control how open and honest you are. You can control if you and your partner feel the same way about a topic like sleeping around. There are open relationships that work. There are people that have boyfriends, girlfriends outside of their relationship, and it works for them, and they're happy with that. And then there are people that are just the two of them, and that works for them, and they're happy with that. The problem comes when one person in the relationship feels a specific way about it and the other person doesn't. But they don't talk to each other. They don't tell each other about that. So I don't even remember where I started going off on that tangent. But yeah, the communication will help everything else in your relationship. Money can be difficult and it can be hard. You have to have the same priorities. Again, back to communication. You have to have the same priorities on money. Even when it comes to kids, you have to have the same priorities on kids, and you have to be open and honest, because those are things that will break a relationship. And by hiding something when you meet somebody, by pretending you feel a certain way when you don't, just because, well, I want to be with this person, so I'll just go ahead and maybe I'll eventually feel that way. You're not doing yourself any favors. There's these subreddits that I've read that the people will go on the post relationship issues that they're having, that kind of thing. And I've seen so many posts from people, especially from women, but men do this too, where they'll say, when we got together, we agreed that we didn't want to have kids, but I really did want to have kids. And I just thought, well, eventually I'll change my mind or they'll change their mind. And sure, maybe eventually you'll change your mind, but guess what? If you don't feel that way today, there's no way to guarantee you'll feel that way 10 years down the road. And if 10 years down the road, neither one of you have changed your mind, well, that's a sticking point. That's a huge, huge point in a relationship. If you financially, if you're comfortable living just paycheck to paycheck and you just want to pay the bills and be able to have a little bit of spending money, but your partner wants to climb the career ladder and make $1 million, that's a huge sticking point. You're going to have completely different ideas of what you want to do and how you want to spend your money. That's a huge sticking point from money. If you don't necessarily want to settle down with one person and you want to be out there with other people, but your partner wants to be with one person only, that's a huge sticking point. That's a problem. So you need to address these things up front. You need to be honest about them. You need to communicate. And if you do those things, you're going to have a great time. You're going to have a great relationship. You should get to the point. The best relationships are when you're with your best friend. You know, my wife and I can go anywhere and do anything together. And as long as we have each other, we're having a great time. We're having a blast. You know, we have already decided on what we want to do in a few years when the kids are all out and when we're empty nesters. And as long as we're together, we're happy. We're helping each other out. We're supporting each other. We each have our own dreams, our own things we want to do, and we're helping each other get there, and we're working together as a team. And you can get there too in your relationship, but you both have to be on board. You both have to be willing to do it. And if maybe you got something helpful out of this video. First of all, hit the thumbs up button, like the video. This is my weekly podcast. But if you got something out of this, and maybe you have a spouse or a partner that, you feel needs to see this, maybe it could help them out, get you guys on the same page. Share the video, because my goal here with this series in general, my goal is to partially be nostalgic about growing up and the things that happened throughout my life, but also share things that I've gone through in the hope that maybe somebody else who's going through the same thing won't have such a difficult time. If my wife and I had been open and communicative from the get-go, there are so many issues that we could have gotten through without the problems that we had. And we could have got to where we are today sooner. And that right there, if you could get to where you are today sooner, that is the whole point about being able to tell your past self, hey, do this or don't do this, because you want to get to where you are sooner. Yeah, those experiences make you who you are today, but realistically, the struggles, if you could overcome some of the struggles a little easier and not have to suffer as much as you did, why wouldn't you want to? And that's what this whole series is about. So if you like this video, share it, thumbs up and all that good stuff, but also subscribe to the channel, because I share these podcasts. I try to do it every week. I just recently started adding video. If you're watching on YouTube, you see the video. But they're available in audio form on Patreon. They're available in audio form on YouTube Music, Spotify through Patreon, or my website. They're also available on there, so you can listen to them up to a week before they come out live on YouTube. So that's all stuff to consider. I appreciate you all. Appreciate you watching. I hope you got something out of this video. I've got a lot of other great topics to come up. I've got a whole list of things I've got to cover. So I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.